Are we live already? That really happened very quickly on the side. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the pre-show for today's SY0-701 Security Plus Study Group. Ooh, I don't know if I set up a thing that I needed to set up on my mailing list. So we're going to have to pop over there. Let's see if I can put myself in a box here. There we go. Let's pop over to that. I think I forgot to get the notification email set up. See, this is why we do a pre-show. And if you weren't sure, is it really live? Yeah, it's super live. But that's why we sort of go live 10 minutes before. I run through the checklist, and then anything I've forgotten like that, because it's been a day, there's always something going on. There's always an activity that is up and about. So we will be starting in approximately 8 minutes and 45 seconds. So I'm trying to post this thing. And of course, the website that I use to automatically log in. Oh, there we go. Now it's working. It's always good when you forget to do something. Go, I'll just pop in here really quick and I'll do. No, you won't. There's our study group Q&A. There we go. Let's look at previous. All I do is take the previous broadcast. It's a notification email list for this event. And so I usually will just take the one I did previously and simply send that one out. Because all it really says is, hey, we're going live. The problem is that I normally send this in about 4 minutes to 3 minutes from now. So I have to do it quick. Okay, choose a date. That would be today. Choose a time. Let's see if we can do it at 11:55. Scroll. There it is, 11:55. Schedule the message. Hey, I think it worked, everybody. So we'll find out. Yeah, there we go. It's scheduled. See? I love it. So good. And now that part is done. See, that's why we do a live stream with 10 minutes beforehand to really get things going. Let's bring up the chat room. Hey, chat room. I saw you folks are already busy. You already got stuff going on in there. Thanks for being here, everyone. Folks checking in from all over the place. We got folks in Barbados. We have Orlando is here. Fellow Orlandoians. What do we call ourselves when we're from Orlando? I don't know. Sarasota is here. Hello, London. Not sure which one. Probably the one we're all thinking, right? There's a lot of different Londons around. I think there's really only one London. Ultimately, that's the one we all focus on. Oh, so we've got a lot more to go through the rest of this. Hello, Georgia and Tijuana and Minneapolis and Haiti and the UK. See, UK. UK is what's going on there. The Philippines are here. Portugal, Minnesota. There's Ghana and California, Malaysia. There's Malk. Hey, Malk. How are things in St. Vincent? Hope everything is going well. Saw another storm out there. Maybe that's going to the north and not going to affect any of us, right? Nebraska, Alabama. Thanks for being here. More Minnesota. A lot of Florida here today. Fernandina Beach, Amelia Island area. Thanks for being here. And everybody's checking in. You know what I should do is put up the map, and you can look over my shoulder here as I open that poll. There we go. And now you can go here and put your digital pin into the map. Yeah, we have some folks already doing it. You can kind of see it right there. So folks, look like you're in DC or New York City. Some folks in Canada, thanks for being here. I will let Mrs. Professor Messer know that the Canadian contingent has arrived. So the hurricane did slightly affect me. Yes. We could have done a study group the day after. We had power that came back on. Internet was already up and running. But it pretty much went over the house. It went right over the studio. And we didn't lose power on the first half of the storm. It was the back half of the storm that was the worst. And that was the one that took out our power. And that's it. Your session code is on the screen, professormesser.com/QA. That's what you need. You don't really need anything else but that, because that takes you right to the code. That way you don't have to know that the code today is 123437157. What I'd like is a code that was always the same. So the security plus code would always be the security plus code. I got to work on that. I think there's some ways to do that. We'll have to work on that. So we got about 4.5 minutes to go. We start at the top of the hour. Quickly, we'll look at our cameras. Cameras look good. It's a nice looking fella there. We've got yep, those are good. Our recordings, can't really see them so much with the lower third there. But you can see the Cylons are down there recording, which is good. Did not have enough space on one of them on the last study group last week. I ended up not recording the whole thing. But I always have 2 recordings going, and the other one did. Yay. So, plus there's a recording on the YouTube. So I could ultimately go back to YouTube and pull that down, which we have done before. Sometimes that happens. Yes, these toasters. That's such a good show. I'm not sure I really like the last season so much. It's like most things, right? But still, it delivered. Ultimately, it delivered, and that's what we wanted. It was, that looks good. Everything here is fine. Okay, we're so good. So good. So good. Works very well. Why do I always wear that shirt with Security Plus? It's funny you would ask, because this shirt is not the shirt I wore last month. It's not the shirt I wore the month before that. This is a different shirt. So you don't see me prior to me choosing a shirt for the live stream. I'm going to my YouTube and going, what I do last month. All right, what about the month before that? Okay, I don't want to repeat either of those. And so we do that. Last month was purple. So that was good. And the month before that was a similar red, but it had different kind of thing happening in the shoulders. So this is another red shirt. I try to at least get the color close to red, but not always. Kind of how that works. What else we got going on here? Numbers are good. This looks good. I ran an internet link. There's a lot of construction in my neighborhood right now, so I'm always concerned that somebody's going to cut a fiber. So I'm constantly watching it, constantly running a fast.com check to see what type of throughput I'm getting. And that works really well. Fast.com's it's tended to be what I just go to these days. It's so consistent. And that's what I'm looking for in my speed test. But plus it's easy to type. Plus it's what I want. I want fast.com. So why would I go to a different site to do that? Okay. Let's see if everything else is set up. Yep. Audio looks good. Everything is potted off except for the microphone, which is good. If you start from scratch, can you follow my course on Security Plus? Of course. You certainly can. A lot of people do. It's interesting that a lot of people, Security Plus is their first certification. So that's perfectly reasonable and normal and what some people do. Some people start with A+. Some people start with Security Plus. Some people start with Network Plus. It just depends on what your requirements are. You might have an employer that really, really, really wants you to get Security Plus. So of course you would start with that. Just makes so much sense. We got a minute to go before we get things started. Let's make sure this camera is working. Yes, it is. We should probably get it on the right slide. That looks nice. We have Kevin in the chat room passed Security Plus yesterday with a 777. That's a lucky number after 8 hours of reviewing the videos. Had Security Plus and worked in the industry since 2010. So this was like a refresher. Kevin just refreshed and got it done. Nice job. Nice job on that one. We'll have to see what we can come up with next. A lot of folks are saying, well, what if you do Cloud Plus? What if you did Server Plus? What if you did a different one? We'll have to see. We'll have to see where we go with that. There's a lot of activity going on right now with different exams, and we've got a lot of prep work that we're doing behind the scenes. Let's watch this go to noon. We'll get this thing happening. And there it is, 12 noon. That means we can bring up our keynote. We can click on and get our green light. I like it. And we're playing. Everything looks so good. That means it's time for a live stream, everybody. Here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the October 2024 Professor Messer SY0-701 Security Plus Study Group. This is the study group where I ask you questions that come directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. We get to see how well you might know the answers to some of these. Every month is a different set of questions that I create, and we get to ask these questions online, and you get to answer these questions online. If you're someone who would like to join us, if you are here live and you would like to answer some of these questions, pop open a new browser window and head over to this URL that you see on your screen, professormesser.com/QA, and we will be able to provide you with questions and answers from that screen. For example, we have one waiting for you just to see if this is going to work okay for you. The question that you will find if you go to that URL of professormesser.com/QA, you go to there and you'll see a question that asks, which of the following is responsible for allowing, monitoring, and terminating connections? This is a question we asked last month. This is the only time we redo a question, is at the very beginning, just to see if you can get in and to see if maybe you remember what the answer was to this question. The rules that we have in our chat and in our live stream is please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. Instead, you want to go to that URL. The question again asks, which of the following is responsible for allowing, monitoring, and terminating connections? Is it a policy enforcement point, a policy engine, a control plane, a policy administrator, or an operational control? We will come back to this question in just a moment. So lock in your answer by going to that URL, professormesser.com/QA, and tell me what you think the answer is for that one. Thanks so much for being here. We do one of these study groups every month. As I mentioned earlier, this is the one for October of 2024. So we are here in this part of the world. We are in the fall part of the of what we normally call the autumn of the year. This is where things start getting a little cooler depending on where you are in the country. This is also a place where we tend to do a lot of Q&A, but this is only for this 2-hour stretch. What are you going to do when the live stream is over? Well, we have an entire YouTube channel of our entire course. Every video, every minute of every video is on that YouTube channel. It'd be a great thing for you to subscribe to. Go to professormesser.com/YouTube. Also, don't forget about our daily, in the case of Security Plus, weekly pop quiz questions. You'll find them on the service formerly known as Twitter at professormesser.com/Twitter, and the service currently known as Instagram, professormesser.com/Instagram. This is also one you can find on LinkedIn. We also put them on Facebook. If you want to find us on social media, just type in professormesser.com/ the name of that particular place, /Facebook, /LinkedIn, /Google Plus. No, you won't find us on Google Plus. It's one of those. Eventually, we do sometimes not have links to certain, and that is one of them. The Google Plus no longer with us, unfortunately. Today, we're going to be talking about Security Plus, specifically the SY0-701 exam. This is an exam that was released on November the 7th of 2023. So it's not even a year old yet. We're coming up on its birthday. It will estimated to be retired somewhere around May of 2027 because these exams are generally available for about 3.5 years before they are retired. For you, this means that you have plenty of time to study. You are studying the right version. If all of your study materials say that they are the 701, then you've got the right books, you've got the right videos, you've got the right Q&A, you've got all the right study materials you need. That's the version. It's a single exam. You don't have to pass more than one exam. The exam itself is 90 minutes in length. You could get a maximum of 90 questions on the exam. You could get fewer than 90 questions as well. Just depends. The passing score that you're hoping to get on a scale from 100 to 900 is a score of 750. And if you are familiar with the previous version of the Security Plus exam, this is exactly the same format as that version. There are performance-based questions at the beginning of the exam. We'll talk about those in a moment. And there are multiple choice questions in the exam as well. If you're studying for your 701, our videos are, of course, available for you to watch for free. It is a full and complete course that covers every topic that is listed in the official CompTIA exam objectives. But of course, if you need additional study materials like course notes, practice exams, and more, you can find that on our website. We have that all in one big bundle called our Success Bundle, and you can go to professormesser.com/701SB for the Success Bundle, or you can simply choose from the links at the top of the website. This is a way that you could take some of the free materials that we use, maybe grab some things that might be important for you to help learn this material, and then combine those together, which not only helps you get that certification, also helps support what we do here. And hopefully you'll have a look at that. Of course, we do have this live stream available for replay immediately afterwards on YouTube. It's done automatically as soon as we hit the stop button. But I do make an audio-only podcast version of this. So if you're in your car, you're working out, you'd like something that is an audio version of this, you can find it at professormesser.com/podcast. That is where you would find our A+ Network Plus and Security Plus Study Group podcast replays. And if you're on a type of streaming service like Spotify, for example, it's already there. Just search for Professor Messer on Spotify, and you'll certainly find all of the podcasts there as well. As I mentioned, we have this also available on YouTube, so you can watch the video replay. And about a day later, my marketing manager, Lori, who's watching this, hey, Lori, she's going through this entire video and putting in all of the timestamps for this event. That way you're able to find everything we did today and be able to jump to it to the exact second in the timestamps of the video. You'll see that in the YouTube video description. It's almost like magic, but it's not. It's Lori magic that makes it happen. And you can see that you can go back years to find all of those timestamps that are there. Of course, when we're not here doing a live stream, we're still hanging out. We're still doing things, but usually it's over on our Discord. You'll find me and a lot of other people, thousands of folks over on our Discord that are studying for their A+, Network Plus, Security Plus, and other industry certifications. And there are often conversations going on that have nothing to do with technology. It's a great community with fantastic folks in it. You'll find that over on our website, professormesser.com/Discord. You can choose the links on the top right of the website, or simply type in professormesser.com/Discord to go to our 24/7 chat in that service. That is a great service. We're enjoying having everyone there. It's always nice to see everyone there and have conversations. We had some good conversations this morning about RAID and about security, and there were some interesting things that people were asking. So it's a nice place to start learning. You can also start your own study groups within the Discord, which is kind of nice as well. Eventually, you will need to take the Security Plus exam if you want to get certified. You could go to the CompTIA website and pay full price for that certification voucher. Or if you went to professormesser.com/vouchers, you would be able to purchase the exact same voucher at a discount. So save a few bucks. Head over to professormesser.com/vouchers if you happen to live in the US or Canada. And if you do purchase it from our site, I'll give you something you can't get anywhere else, which is a copy of my Exam Hacks ebook. This is a list of tips and tricks that I put together through the years of taking industry certification exams for things that can help you during the study process. Also strategies you can use during the exam itself to hopefully maximize the number of points that you're going to score. That is something that is included for free automatically if you purchase the voucher from our site. It's not sold separately. It only is available with our success bundles and with our voucher purchases. So you can add that to your list. Let's go back to that question we asked earlier. The question is, which of the following is responsible for allowing, monitoring, and terminating connections? Which one would that be? Would it be a policy enforcement point, a policy engine, a control plane, a policy administrator, or an operational control? Let's click this link and see what the options are. This is the one that shows 41% of you said that it's the policy enforcement point. 20% say policy administrator, 18% say control plane. We have 11% that said operational control, and 7% that say policy engine. This is probably another one of those questions that a lot of people have looked at and tried to figure out, because this is something a little bit new when you start getting into the details of this particular topic. When you talk about these types of systems and being able to allow or disallow traffic flows through the network, there has to be some method to be able to make a decision on whether traffic is allowed or the traffic should be blocked. And to be able to make that determination, the place that is responsible for allowing, monitoring, and terminating connections, which was our question, the answer is indeed a policy enforcement point. That was the one that most of you chose for this particular answer. As you remember, the plurality of you did choose policy enforcement point. 41% of you chose that one. So it would not be a policy administrator or a control plane. If we wanted to really map out the whole zero trust architecture, it looks something like this. So you do have indeed, well, let's go back. Can't see it unless we look at it. There we go. So you have the different planes of operation, your data plane and your control plane, and you can see how all of those different components work together to be able to make those decisions on your network. Policy enforcement point is what we were looking for. That is the right answer, and that's the one that makes those ultimately decides what is allowed, what is monitored, what is terminated. It's the one doing all the hard work and making that happen. That is exactly where we should go to ultimately that is the part of that entire structure that is responsible for allowing and disallowing those connections. So that is the answer that we were looking for, policy enforcement point, and 41% of you got that one absolutely correct. Now I'd like to shift gears a little bit because a lot of you are familiar with the structure of the Security Plus exam, but if you've never taken a CompTIA exam before, you might be a little surprised when you start the exam because the first handful of questions you get on the exam will not be multiple choice questions. Multiple choice questions, of course, are very similar to the one we just looked at, where there was a question and there were multiple answers that you could select from. But of course, not all questions are going to be that way on the exam. Anything that is not a multiple choice question on the CompTIA exams is considered to be a performance-based question. Sometimes you'll hear these referred to as PBQs, performance-based questions. This means that the question just happens to be anything but multiple choice. It could be fill in the blank. It could be a drag and drop question. It could be a matching question. It could ask you to put things in a particular order. There could be pull-down menus. Ultimately, as I often say, it doesn't really matter how they ask the question. If you know the material and you know the exam objectives, you can easily answer anything that may be posed in any way to you. Today, I wanted to do a little bit different question than I normally do for performance-based questions. This one has a couple of extra steps to it. And in some ways, I think this question I'm about to present to you may be a little bit harder than what you might see on the exam, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. But it does cover topics that are very important to the exam. And trust me, I think you'll get something out of this regardless of how difficult or not difficult you might think it would be. So that being said, let's give you today's performance-based question. This is our performance-based question of the month. And it asks this question. Let me bring it up on my side because it's a big one. You can see there's a lot of text here. This one asks, a company uses 4 packaging computers in their shipping department, and the total cost of replacing all of the computers is $20,000. A failed device is valued at half of its original cost based on the parts value. So we get to use it for parts if it breaks. 2 of the computers are expected to fail each year. Based on this information, calculate the ALE. So there, a big wordy question for us to jump into our performance-based questions of the month. But if you break this one down, this one is actually much simpler than it seems to be based on this word question that's here. So for those of you listening in again, let me give you the question. It asks, a company uses 4 packaging computers in their shipping department, and the total cost of replacing all the computers is $20,000. A failed device is valued at half of its original cost based on the parts value. 2 of the computers are expected to fail each year. Based on this information, calculate the ALE. I think I was pretty accurate when I said this one would be a little more challenging but a lot of people are already submitting answers. You can't see it on your side. I see the number of answers that are coming in, and a number of you are giving me some different values. And I love to see this. Most of them are right. Even on top of this, maybe this isn't as hard as I thought it was going to be. Now I'm a little disappointed in myself that I intended it to be challenging. I did not intend it to be hard. Maybe I hit a sweet spot. Maybe we were successful at giving you something that would really help understand some of the most important values and calculations that you would need to know, especially as it relates to risk. And that's what this question is really about. So you have to know a few things to be able to answer this. There's a little bit of math involved, but I did make them round numbers, so that would be relatively easy. You do have to know what an ALE is. I don't want to give too much away. I don't think I am giving anything away, but there's the challenge, of course, is to be able to calculate this. We have to understand what that is. And that's another thing that I'll mention on this question specifically, is that the exam almost never asks you a direct question. For example, you will never get a question on the exam. I will say never in this case. You will never get a question on the exam that says, what do the letters ALE stand for? It will never ask you that question. Instead, it will ask you a question where you are expected to implement or know how to calculate ALE, very similar to what we have in front of us. So let's see how we do with this one. A lot of you already locked in your answer for this one, and we're going to break it down and look at every segment of this particular question and how it is laid out. So I think this should be a good one to kind of step through. A lot of you have already submitted your answers for this one. More than half of you have already submitted your answer. So let's step through the way I calculated it to determine if we would be able to understand what to do with this. So let's kind of break this down. How would we cover this question if this was an actual exam question? So let's take the question. There we are. The question's on the left side here. Company uses 4 packaging computers. So in the shipping department, there are computers they have that package things together. And there's a cost associated with all of those. So there's a little bit of math we have to do. So we have to calculate the ALE. That was the thing we'll start with. The ALE stands for an annualized loss expectancy. It's a dollar value that helps us understand how much money are we losing every year, or could we potentially lose every year based on the risks that we have. So something like shipping and receiving, I didn't even go into the details of how much money do we lose if we're not able to ship properly. That could really be added to this question, but I tried to keep it simple. To calculate the ALE, we need to multiply the ARO times the SLE. Wait, there's more abbreviations. It's okay, I break them out. The ARO is an annualized rate of occurrence. This is how much we expect this particular problem to occur in a 12-month or annual period. The SLE is a single loss expectancy, and that is a combination of the value of the asset multiplied by what's known as the exposure factor, or the EF. Yes, another abbreviation. The final one, thankfully, the EF is the exposure factor. That is the percentage of the value that you lose when you happen to have this particular problem or this incident that occurs. So that is everything we have to know. In fact, all of those come directly from the CompTIA exam objective. So you have to know what all of these things happen to be. I'm not introducing anything new with this. But now we need to take everything that's in the word problem and get it into the format that we need to be able to calculate these. Now, to do this, I'm actually going to reverse this list, and I'm going to start with the exposure factor and work our way backwards. That's how we're going to do with this. And I will tell you, some folks in the chat were going, this is really a lot of math. Well, it is. But on the exam, you might only be asked for one of these. Or you could be asked a question like this on the exam. It's certainly within scope. It just seems like it's one that would take you a little bit of time. But as we step through this, you're going to see just how quick this goes. So let's do this. We have this company using 4 packaging computers. We need to understand the exposure factor. What is the percentage of the value lost if we have an incident with one of these? It's one of the last things in here that says that we have the failed device is valued at half of its original cost based on parts value. So if one of these breaks, we don't lose all of the value in that particular device. Sometimes you do. If your firewall breaks, there's very little you can do with a broken firewall. You pretty much have to swap it out. In this particular case, we have a system that breaks. This packaging computer breaks. All right, put it on the pile. We'll use it for parts if we lose another computer. So we can grab parts out of that one to repair other ones. So it really we only lose half of its value. And if we lose half of its value, that's 50% of the value. And for the purposes of our calculations, 50% is the same thing as 0.5. So our exposure factor for this particular question is 0.5. Even though we didn't ask that, we have to know that part of it. So that's where that comes from. So now that we know the exposure factor, let's calculate a single loss expectancy. This is how much money we will lose if one of these devices, a single device, happens to fail. And we have this case, but we weren't given the numbers directly on how much these computers are worth individually. I did give you values on how much these computers are worth as a whole, just to make it a little more complicated. And we know that the computers, all four of them, are worth $20,000. So if we divide 20,000 by 4, we know that that is 5,000. So each computer is valued at $5,000. But of course, if we lose a computer, we don't lose all of that $5,000. We only lose 50% of it, or 0.5. So we can multiply the 5,000 by 0.5. Each time we have a loss of one computer, that is a loss expectancy of approximately $2,500. That's where that number comes from. So we also know that we need to calculate how many times is this going to happen in a year. That number is referred to as the ARO. That is the annualized rate of occurrence. And in this question, we know that 2 of the computers are expected to fail each year. We spelled out for you the ARO. We could have said the ARO is 2, which is exactly what that sentence means. So we'll put a 2 next to our ARO. At this point, we have all of the numbers we need to be able to calculate the final value. And if we calculate the ALE, the annualized loss expectancy, we need to multiply, in this case, the ARO times the SLE. The ARO is 2. There it is. The SLE is 2,500. 2 times 2,500 is 5,000. So based on that information, the amount of money that we would expect to lose in a year from these packaging computers is approximately $5,000. That is the entire calculation from beginning to end for this particular problem. Now, what was interesting with this one, and you don't see it on your side, but I get to see all the answers that folks are putting in on their side. A lot of people said 5,000. You did great with this question. You did fantastic with this question. In fact, most of you, as I'm scrolling through, said 5,000. Some said 0.5, some said 10,000. You were close. You had the idea. Some people spelled it all out the same way. You guys did great with this particular question. This is how I would break these out. And on your exam, they could ask you for this full rundown like we have here, or it might be just asking you individual pieces of this. Based on this information, what is the ARO? Based on this information, what is the EF? They might not even tell you, oh, that's exposure factor. They probably won't tell you that it's annualized rate of occurrence. You just need to know those. So it could be that I took you through an entire a series of these so that we could learn each one of them. That's the point of a study group. But I think that on the exam, you could be asked for any of these. So have a look, see what you think, and make all of those things happen. I'm going to very quickly, I just got a notice that someone is doing a thing in my home and I need to forward my phone. How do you like that for a live event? So I'm going to my iPhone and in the middle of a live study group, I'm going down and adding in, oh wait, where did they put everything now? Everything's in apps now. I have the new version of the software. So we're going to go through, maybe I'm not going to do this. Maybe I've had it and we're not going through the apps anymore. We'll type in, one good thing, if you're familiar with this, the apps have a search feature. So we're able to search for the phone information very, very, very quickly and do things like forward calls very quickly. that's what we're going to do. So hopefully you're familiar with these measurements. These are risk measurements. And for those of you that are familiar with these, this is from my SY0-701 exam. It's in section 5.2. The video that you're looking for is called risk analysis. And it breaks down each one of these different variables so that if any of this was, you were unsure of these, you weren't familiar with the topic, or you just wanted more details about it, I would recommend going to that video. And I lay out for you a different scenario dealing with laptops. So you can use that same information to kind of break down where these different settings are and what's going to be important. So that's what I would recommend you do as well. Make sure you're familiar with those topics. They could certainly show up on your exam. They're a very common thing for them to ask on exams. So make sure you're familiar with all of them. By the way, you did great with that performance-based question. You crushed it much better than I was expecting. So well done with that. Some folks have really been studying their calculations of risk, and you can tell it really shows. Let's do another question. This time, let's go back to a multiple choice question. So anybody can answer this one, and we have a pretty good chance of getting this one right. This next question asks, let me bring it up on my side so I can ask you the right question. A company has discovered JavaScript embedded within the text of their public message board. Which of the following would be the most likely description of this attack? Would this be brute force, buffer overflow, XSS, race condition, or side loading? Got a few to choose from. The question again asks, a company has discovered JavaScript embedded within the text of their public message board. Which of the following would be the most likely description of this attack? Is it brute force, buffer overflow, XSS, race condition, or side loading? If you think you know the answer, there's the link. Go to professormesser.com/QA. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. You want to follow the link that is on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA to answer that particular question. See if you happen to know what that one is, and I will let the people know on my side that I have forwarded my phone to them to make all of those things happen. We'll have to see if you are familiar with this. Knowing these different attacks is also a good thing. Being able to recognize these attacks is also a good thing to know. See if you happen to know this one. Maybe it will help you as we are going through the details of this particular question. We will have to remind everyone, please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. See if you happen to know what these answers are and see if you're familiar with this particular attack type. This might be a pretty good one if you're someone who is really working through the details. Make sure you are very familiar with the different attacks and what they might look like, how they might position this into the mix. So have a look. Your link is on the screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in your answer. See if you know this. Everybody answered this one pretty quick. I think we might have really crushed this particular one. Let's see how you did with this one. The question asks, a company has discovered JavaScript embedded within the text of their public message board. Which of the following would be the most likely description of this attack? Is it a brute force attack, a buffer overflow attack, an XSS attack, a race condition, or a side loading attack? Well, let's see what you chose. We'll stop the poll and see what the answers are. 83% of you, a pretty strong showing, say the answer is XSS, whatever that is. We'll find out in a moment. Side loading, 10% of you said side loading is what this is. That's what is happening there. 10% of you chose that option. The rest of this is single digits, 2% for brute force, 2% for buffer overflow, and not even a percent of you said race condition. Just above 0%. Somebody found one in there to be able to work with it. So with 83% of you choosing cross-site scripting, that's what XSS means. You got it absolutely correct. That is what we are referring to. This is very commonly done on things like social media and other types of centralized message board type software, because everybody's going to that site. And if anybody reads that message, they would effectively be running that malicious code in their browser. And because of that, it's often submitted and deployed as something that will run inside of their browser. And that's done through, very commonly, JavaScript is what we work with that. So this is something, if you are ever in the case of looking at a social media site and you're trying to type a message in, and you notice that some of the things that you might want to type into that message are filtered. Maybe it prevents you from putting HTML into that message. Maybe it prevents certain words from occurring inside of that message. Maybe special characters are not allowed inside of that message. One of the things that they're doing is limiting the type of input. They are filtering the input into that particular message so that no one can add any type of malicious code. That's one of the many reasons that you would choose that on this. And that is one that we call a persistent or stored cross-site scripting attack, because it is stored on that social media or stored in that message that other people are going to see. So that's a very common attack type. Fortunately, it's something that can be identified relatively easy as a vulnerability. So hopefully most of the places you visit will have closed that particular hole or created filtering for this so that a cross-site scripting attack would be unlikely. Certainly not one that would be associated with an online JavaScript. So if you filter JavaScript, you can prevent anybody from using JavaScript as a cross-site scripting attack. Very good example of that. And there are only there's a limited number of ways to make a browser do that type of thing. Your browser also has defenses inside of it that can help prevent against some of these attack types as well. It's a combination of the browser and the website working together to make sure that you are as safe as possible. So in this case, the answer was indeed cross-site scripting, XSS, which is the abbreviation for cross-site scripting. We don't use CSS because CSS is a cascading style sheet. It's a type of HTML formatting method that we use on websites. So that is the one associated with that option. The ones that we did not choose, sideloading, 10% of you chose sideloading, interestingly enough. Sideloading is when we install software onto a mobile device that is outside the scope of the normal installation process. For example, if you have an iOS device from Apple, you're commonly going to the Apple App Store to be able to install software. But what if you were able to install software without going to the App Store? We refer to that as sideloading. It is generally frowned upon because now we would have to trust where that software came from. And in the case of iOS itself, iOS doesn't even allow you to do sideloading, not directly. There are ways that people will add their own firmware to a mobile device to allow it to perform sideloading. Significant concerns with security associated with that, and that's one of the reasons it's mentioned as part of the Security Plus exam. We also have brute force and buffer overflow got the same number of percentage, just over 2%. Brute force is obviously an attack type where we are trying to constantly gain access to a system by either iterating through a series of different options or trying different processes to be able to gain access. That was not the situation here. Embedded JavaScript is not a brute force attack. It's also not a buffer overflow attack. Buffer overflow attack is something the attacker can do themselves. Embedding JavaScript into a public message board itself is not a buffer overflow attack. And then a race condition. Race condition is when two things can occur simultaneously, and that type of condition is not taken into account. That simultaneous function is not considered in the programming, so that one thing could be happening without knowing that another thing is happening at the same time. That often can create security problems in itself. So the only option that makes any sense here would be cross-site scripting, XSS. If you chose cross-site scripting, you got that one absolutely correct. Well done. Let's do another one. Next question on our list is this one that asks, a company uses a system that uses a deterministic processing schedule during operation. Which of the following would best describe this system? Would it be IoT, RTOS, SCADA, embedded, or ICS? Got a few options there. A company uses a system that uses a deterministic processing schedule during operation? Which of the following would best describe this system? Is it IoT, RTOS, SCADA, embedded, or ICS? If you know the answer, you see the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. I'm not beyond begging. I'm not beyond pleading. So I'm happy to remind you of that. And see if you know the answer. You can submit your answer and lock it in by visiting the URL on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA. You don't even have to change from that screen. It will automatically update when the next question is presented. What could be easier? Have a look at that at professormesser.com/QA. Hopefully you're familiar with this scenario, this particular instance. I don't want to give too much away on this one. So we're simply going to let you think about this one and what it might be. As always, you can submit your question by visiting the URL on your screen. Please go to professormesser.com/QA to submit your answer. This might be one that you're familiar with. Maybe you've worked with these before. I think this might be a good one to be able to work through. I'd like to see what you do with this one. We're going to change a few things here. See if we can make this happen. Let's see how you did with this one. I think a lot of you might be familiar with this. The question again asks, a company uses a deterministic processing schedule during operation. Which of the following would best describe this system? Is it IoT, RTOS, SCADA, embedded, or ICS? Still a lot of abbreviations on this one, isn't it? Let's see how you did. We'll stop our poll and see how you answered. Oh, we're all over the place. We've got a lot of different answers that are in double digits. 40% of you say the answer is RTOS. 28% of you say the answer is SCADA. We have 12% that say embedded and the same 12% that say ICS. Well, not the same 12%. You know what I'm saying. And then 5% of you said IoT. So a lot of acronyms in this one. But if we go with the plurality of you that answered the question, we did not get a majority, but we got a lot of you that said 40%. It was the highest number here. So it does count as what we are going to go with as the answer, which is RTOS. But is it really RTOS? Well, we kind of have to break this down a little bit to understand what that happens to be. RTOS stands for Real-Time Operating System. Wait, aren't all systems real-time operating systems? Isn't that how this works for these? Not actually. For example, DOS, Windows, and a lot of operating systems that we use as users, Linux, Mac OS, not deterministic. This is a real challenge because the way that a lot of our systems, a lot of our personal computers work is it's in many cases kind of a round robin scenario. There's an idea of there are ways around this, but the fundamental method used to determine who gets to do what in a computer system in our traditional computers, our personal computers, is done through something called interrupts. So if you are typing on your keyboard has to interrupt whatever's going on and say, excuse me, I'm typing here. Could you put that on the screen for me, please? Regardless of whatever happens to be going on. The problem, of course, is if you're in a vehicle and you are in a situation where it's raining and in the middle of the road is an animal and you're trying to stop, you hit the brakes. You don't want you turning anything with the radio to interrupt what's happening with your anti-braking system. Your anti-braking system should be its own machine that nothing else can interrupt. And that means that we have a deterministic processing schedule. The processing is determined by the operating system itself, and it doesn't change its direction or modify what it's doing based on what else might be going on. And that's pretty important when you get into industrial machines, vehicles, anything where seconds, milliseconds, nanoseconds count. Pretty important to be able to deal with that. Military environments, for example, are that. These are obviously systems that you want to be very careful with from a security perspective, because we don't want anybody to gain access to what obviously is a system that has been built to protect and provide immediate responses when certain things occur. You don't want a system that's designed to shoot down incoming missiles to be doing something else and not really be paying attention to the incoming missiles. So that's why it is a deterministic operating system, so that it will not be sent somewhere else doing something else. Typing on a keyboard would not prevent you from protecting that particular area of the world. That is what we are talking about with real-time operating systems, or RTOS. And that is the answer we were hoping for. That is the one we were working on. And that is the answer that most of you chose. 40% of you did choose a real-time operating system because it is deterministic in this particular case. See if that's something that you are familiar with. And of course, we do have these. If you're not familiar with these, we do have a video, section 3.1, other infrastructure concepts. That's where we have the information on real-time operating systems. SCADA is a description of the idea of industrial equipment and being able to network and control that industrial equipment. Large-scale equipment, especially used for things like power creation, power systems. They have their own processes and procedures for accessing and communicating to those systems over a SCADA network. For that very reason, SCADA networks are very often completely isolated from all of the other networks in that company. I've worked with a lot of power companies, and their normal power company network for customer service, their administration, their billing systems, everything they would do as a normal business are one network. And then there is a completely different, completely isolated network that is designed to monitor, maintain, and allow them to keep track of what's happening with their power generation systems. So pretty important. That was something that we always are concerned about, because we don't want people getting access to our billing systems, but we really don't want them getting access to our power grid. So that's why SCADA is one that has a really big security requirement, but it is not necessarily deterministic in its processing schedule. So not the best answer for this particular question. We also have embedded. An embedded operating system is one that is built into a system that normally you don't have access or direct access to the operating system itself. Things like a time clock is an embedded system. You walk up, you badge in, it knows that you're there. You didn't see a Windows login. There wasn't a mouse that you were moving around. You simply just tapped your badge on this device. And inside of it, there's obviously an operating system running, but you don't get to see that. It is all embedded. We also have ICS, IoT. These types of technologies, the last ones that are here, are not deterministic processing schedule type operating systems. This is, well, especially with things like IoT, we're very familiar with those. Those are systems that can be any type of operating system. And deterministic operating systems are generally specialized operating systems. They are running on specialized hardware. They're not something we would commonly see embedded in our homes, for example. We don't need a deterministic processing if all we want to do is have our garage door go up and back down again, or turn on a light, turn off a light. It's obviously not that complicated. But for things that are in your vehicle, things that we use in the military, things that are large industrial equipment that's very time sensitive, RTOS is exactly what we would hope for, and that's the one we would want to use. That is the answer, and 40% of you did choose RTOS. Well done with that one. Nice job. All of these topics, you've already seen a ton of acronyms. We've covered a lot of different areas of security already, and we're just getting into this. We have much more to go through. And one of the things I often mention is I really encourage you to watch my entire course. But it's 121 videos. It's a lot of videos, over 15 hours of content in the course. Not everybody is able to go through every minute of every single video. So there might be some information that you're not able to get access to. Fortunately, we do have a way to consolidate all of this together into a form that perhaps you could look through. And this is a set of our course notes. Our course notes takes all of the important text, all of the important graphics, all of the important tables from all of our videos, and puts all of this into one single document that is organized and set up in the same format as the official exam objectives from CompTIA, and in the same format and structure as our videos themselves. So you can very easily use this to go video by video by video to keep track of what we are doing. The course notes themselves, how many pages are in this latest set of course notes? There's 96 pages. We won't count the last page here. 96 pages of information. dealing with the course notes that are here. So there's a lot of content that we pack into a very small area. Not only do we have the digital version, that PDF that you just saw, there are physical versions of the course notes as well. And if you purchase the physical version, I will ship this copy to you, not this copy, but a copy to you. And if you purchase the physical version, you get the digital edition for free. So while you're waiting for this to be delivered, you can download and start going through your studies in the digital version. That is what is available for our course notes. And there's so much more on our website. Find out more by going to professormesser.com/701CN for our 701 course notes. Let's now go see if we know the next question on our list. This next question asks, a user is assigning share permissions on their spreadsheet for other users to access and edit. Which of the following access controls would best describe this process? Would it be role-based, mandatory, attribute-based, rule-based, or discretionary? Got a few options there. A user is assigning share permissions on their spreadsheet for other users to access and edit. Which of the following access controls would best describe this process? Would it be role-based, mandatory, attribute-based, rule-based, or discretionary? If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. See what a lot of people think they know this one right off. You can see a lot of people answering in here. You can see the numbers go up very, very, very quickly. We're jumping really quickly. So we either know this one or we're really all over the place again. We're about to find out. This might be a gimme. Maybe you really know your access controls. You've locked in your access controls on this one, and everybody's jumping in to be able to answer this one. Hopefully you do. If you think you know the answer, there's the URL on your screen. Please no answers in the chat room. You want to go to professormesser.com/QA to answer this particular question. See if you know it. In fact, you may have done this before. You may have created a spreadsheet, and you may have assigned users to it, and you may have assigned permissions for each one of those users. What was that? So this may be one of those cases where you've done it before, but you didn't know there was a name for it. That's me. I do that all the time. Like, oh, there's actually a term for this, and this would be the term that we are looking for. See if you know what this one happens to be. A lot of you jumped on this one, so let's see if you know the answer. The question again asks, a user is assigning share permissions on their spreadsheet for other users to access and edit. Which of the following access controls would best describe this process? Is it role-based, mandatory, attribute-based, rule-based, or discretionary? What did you choose? Let's close the poll and find out. And of the folks that answered, 52% of you, we got a majority of you say the answer is discretionary. 25% of you, though, a quarter of you, say the answer is role-based. We also have 10% that say attribute-based, 9% that say rule-based, sort of right in the middle of both of those. And then mandatory, only 2% of you say mandatory. You may have even seen this before if you go into a spreadsheet that you've created in Windows, because this was share permissions. So we can really talk about this from a Windows perspective. You know that you can go into the properties of a file and add permissions or remove permissions from it if you have that capability. We refer to this as DAC, discretionary access control. That was the answer, and 52% of you chose that answer. So that was the answer that we were indeed looking for. This is a very common access control method built into a number of different operating systems, not just Windows, not just Linux, not just Mac OS, but others as well. This is one where I even give this example in the video itself, where you're the one who created the spreadsheet. It's your spreadsheet. You filled in some things in the spreadsheet and you thought, I'd like some other people to access this and add some data into the spreadsheet. So I'm going to add them into the permissions for this. I'll put a share out there. I'll change the permissions of this particular file so that this user can access it and edit, but I want somebody else to be able to view it. So I'm going to add them just to be able to read it, but not write to it, not modify it at all. So you as the owner are the one that you get to decide how this particular document is viewed and used in your environment. As the end user, you're the one making those decisions. As the end user, you're the one making those access changes in the properties of the file itself. So you don't need IT. You don't have to call the help desk. You don't have to have a third party do this for you. You don't need special rights and permissions. It's simply something built into the capabilities that you have as a user on the network. The idea, though, of having the end users set these types of permissions is a relatively dangerous thing from a security perspective, because users don't always know the rights and permissions they're turning on. In fact, some users may want to say, well, I don't want to find the exact user. I'm having a problem finding them in the list, or I'd like it to be an entire group of people, but I'm not sure if the group that I'm choosing includes everybody I would like. Let's just make it everyone. Everyone has write access. This is what always happens. So they just completely open the file up for anyone to be able to modify. So discretionary access control is at the discretion of the user. It's not at the discretion of the security team or the management who wants to control access to that data. And that's why it's not a very common access type in a large environment, really, and even in a medium to small business, not the best way to set your rights and permissions. At home, this works great, but inside of a company, this may not be the right solution. Discretionary access control, very flexible, but can also be a significant security concern. So that is the discretionary access control. There are other access controls in here that have more control for the security team and less control for the users. Things like a mandatory access control, for example, that nobody chose. You were spot on with that, because this is almost the opposite of what we have here. We also have rule-based, attribute-based, and role-based. We can look at the roles of a user. If you're in a manager role, maybe you have a certain type of rights. If you are in a director role, it will be a different type of rights and permissions. Attribute-based could be based on a number of different attributes, not just who you are, but where you might be. So we can set different permissions whether you are in the corporate headquarters or whether you might be somewhere else. We can also set very complex rules based on those, maybe combine different attributes together with different file permissions and create a series of rules from that. That's a very relatively complex way to set up rights and permissions and can be difficult to troubleshoot, but it is one of the different access rights and permissions that we need to understand. Make sure you're familiar with those access controls. That is from section 4.6 of the 701. And the video for this one happens to be called, simply enough, Access Controls, to be able to give you a rundown of each of those. The answer we were looking for here was the one that got the majority. 52% of you chose discretionary, and that is the right answer. So hopefully that's given you some perspective of things to know. By the way, if you already have your Security Plus certification or one of the other CompTIA certifications, and you would like to renew that certification using continuing education unit credits, I would love to send you an email that contains a digitally signed document that says you were here for a 1-hour webinar category CEU. The way that you would earn that CEU is you must follow these steps. You go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website, click Contact Us. In that Contact Us link, put your name, your email address. In the subject line, please put October 2024 Security Plus. And in the body of the message on a line by itself, put the super secret code words of the month: discretionary, rule-based. Discretionary, rule-based are the super secret code words of the month. And you can, of course, add other text to that and send it to me. I do read through every single one of these, but you don't have to. You can simply put that, hit the send button, and you're done. So again, the steps that you must follow to earn that email is you go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website, click the Contact Us link. In that Contact Us link, put your name, your email address, put in the subject line October 2024 Security Plus, and in the body of the message, put the super secret code words of the month: discretionary, rule-based. And that will come directly to me. Usually takes me about a week to turn these around, although some of you that were here last week are thinking we're on day 6. You're correct. So hopefully today, maybe this afternoon, I'll go through and clear these out again. So if you get yours in now, you might be able to get a turnaround on that relatively quickly. Make sure you're familiar with those. We've got a little bit of time left before the top of the hour, so let's do another question, shall we? This next question is one you may have run into before. This is one that was taken from a comment I don't know if I read this on Reddit or it was something in our chat room. This is a question that asks, an employee would like to use their company laptop on nights and weekends to write a book about their life. Which of the following should the employee use to determine if this should be allowed? Should it be an AUP, EULA, NDA, SDLC, or SLA? It's an acronym. It's an all alphabet answer. The question again asks, an employee would like to use their company laptop on nights and weekends to write a book about their life. Which of the following should the employee use to determine if this would be allowed? Is it AUP, EULA, NDA, SDLC, or SLA? Which one is it? If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. See if you know which one this one happens to be. A lot of people locking theirs in quick here. So hopefully this is one we are familiar with. This might be one that we have run into before. And of course, if you're someone who is working through this at work, you may have already run into this at work. This might be one of those scenarios where you're working through the details of it. So if you happen to know the answer, lock it in. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. Instead, you want to go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in your answer. I've run into this also in the workplace. So this will be another good one for you to be familiar with. See if you know what this one is. A lot of you have already locked it in, so let's see how you did. The question asks, an employee would like to use their company laptop on nights and weekends to write a book about their life. Which of the following should the employee use to determine if this would be allowed? Is it AUP, EULA, NDA, SDLC, or SLA? Let's stop the poll and see what the answer happens to be. 70% of you, pretty strong showing, say the answer is AUP. We have 14% though that say the answer is EULA. 7% say NDA. 4% say SLA. And 2% say SDLC. So this is a question where we really want to know more about these abbreviations, because I think that's going to be the real hook in all of this and understanding what the differences are. In this particular case, 70% of you say the answer is AUP, and AUP obviously is an acceptable use policy. This is a policy that describes how you're able to use technology. This is something that you usually get when you start with a company. You are now starting with their resources. You're going through the process of being handed a laptop and a phone. And one of the things they will tell you is, well, here's your laptop and here's your phone. But the real question is, how are you able to use that? What is acceptable to the company for you to be able to use that laptop and that phone? That becomes a good question. That's something we want to know about. So that is a really good example of there's always a document to go to that can explain to you what can be done on this laptop and what cannot be done on this laptop. Some organizations will tell you that whenever you start working through these particular intricacies of how this equipment should be used, they might have a policy that says you can do whatever you want with this after hours. This device, this laptop, is to be used for business use during the hours of 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. But after that, if you want to use it at home to buy things on Amazon, to write a book about your life, or to surf the internet, you can do that. They might tell you straight up that that is what you can do. But that is something that has to be documented in that, and make sure you're familiar with the documentation for the acceptable use policy. Make sure that if you are someone who is going through these acronyms, and if there's an acronym you don't recognize, make sure that you're familiar with the acronyms. Every single one of these acronyms is in the exam objectives. So even if you find one that you knew it wasn't EULA, you knew it wasn't NDA, you knew it wasn't SLA, you knew it wasn't SDLC, you still need to know what those are. So I would highly encourage you that if you did not, if you even chose AUP and you got the answer right, make sure you knew what the wrong answers are. It's kind of important as well. For example, EULA, an end-user license agreement, 14% of you chose that one. That is the document that describes how you're able to use a piece of software. For example, if you're installing software and you notice when you're installing the software, there's a lot of text that you scroll all the way to the bottom without reading and you click you agree, that was the EULA. There was important information in there that describes how that software is to be used. And in fact, you agreed with everything that was in that list. You created a contract, but you didn't even read the contract. One of the first things you want to do is make sure you at least glance through that list so you know what is expected of you for that software. That is a EULA. A EULA does not contain any information about how you can use a company asset. It only describes how you're able to use a piece of software from a third party. You also have 7% of you that chose a non-disclosure agreement, or an NDA. Non-disclosure agreements are made between two entities to limit how much someone can say about what they tell each other. Very often, if you're in a meeting with a company that has a new product coming out, but it's not been announced yet, they will make you sign a non-disclosure agreement so that you can see the new product before it's officially released. And you are legally limited when you walk out of that room. You can't tell anybody what you've seen. Very common. Non-disclosures are used for many different reasons. That's just one of them. You have a SLA, a service level agreement. This is usually an agreement made with a service provider. Let's say your internet provider, and you want the internet provider to provide you with service 99.9% of the time, that you can only have a certain amount of downtime during a 12-month period. So that's part of the contract that you now have with that company. We refer to that specification in the contract as a service level agreement. If they don't meet that agreement, there might be some things that happen. Maybe you get a discount on the next month. Maybe you get a refund on the things that are there. That would be your service level agreement. And then you have a software development lifecycle as the last one. Only 2% of you chose that one. Software development lifecycle describes the process of understanding what you need to create for software and then the process of actually creating that software. That is the software development lifecycle. In this particular example, the only one that makes any sense is the one for AUP. 70% of you chose that option. That is indeed the right answer for this particular question. I know we're at the top of the hour, but let's see if we can squeeze in one more question. Can't we? I think we should. The next question on our list is not one that I created for this particular one. You've now seen me scroll through and see that I've chosen my practice exams as this next one. I think that's the one we should use. The practice exams that we have are a set of exams that we built because I went out to the internet and I just wasn't happy with the exams that were out there. So I wrote my own. Every question in this book is one that I have written, just to be sure that it would have the same tone, the same style, the same difficulty level as the questions that you would expect to see on an actual exam. This does not have actual questions, however, for the actual exam. This is an ethical study tool. Make sure you consider that as you're working through it. The practice exams themselves, there are 3 separate 90-question practice exams in this book. The practice exams include multiple choice and performance-based questions in each of the practice exams. And we have links in here. Instead of telling you about it, let's go through the process of actually looking at a practice exam. I have one that we should step through with a question that's waiting for us. Same rule applies, though. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. This is from my practice exam book. This is section A, or practice exam A. There's an A, B, and a C practice exam. It's on page 11. This question asks, a company would like to examine the credentials of each individual entering the data center building. Which of the following would best facilitate this requirement? Would that be an access control vestibule, video surveillance, pressure sensors, or bollards? All 4 of those are things we need to know for our exam. They are all from the exam objectives, but only one fits the description of this particular question. If you just wanted to know where the answer was A, B, C, or D, you could certainly do that by clicking the quick answer or going to page 33. but we also have the details, and that's what we're going to look at. Now, obviously, this is a PDF, so if you saw something in this PDF that you thought, ooh, I want to know, we didn't want to know credentials, we'll start writing on here with our stylus. We'll start marking different things on the screen so that we can really break down where this happens to be. We can even mark what we think the right answer might be in this list. But because this is also a PDF, not only can I annotate the PDF, I have links in the PDF. We're on page 11. The answer we want to see is on page 65. But instead of scrolling through this long document of hundreds of pages, I put a hot link in. So you just click the words, the details, and it takes you right to the question on page 65. So it jumped over to page 65 so that you could see that in the list. And it shows you the question again, and it says the answer is A, access control vestibule, and I give you a description of why that right answer is indeed right. One of my biggest criticisms of practice exams, well, one of the many criticisms I have of practice exams out on the internet, is that they just don't give you enough information. I often will get a question wrong, and my natural response will be, why did I get that wrong? Why is that question incorrect? A lot of the questions I see on the internet will tell you why the right answer was right, but they almost never tell you why the wrong answer was wrong. And I think that's a really good opportunity to kind of close that learning cycle, that learning loop on those. So if you're ever working through these, one of the things you can do is keep scrolling through, and I document every single incorrect answer that is in this so that you can go through every answer that's wrong. And now you really understand why I think that's the wrong answer. So if you chose video surveillance, this is why it's not video surveillance. If you chose pressure sensors, this is why it's not pressure sensors. If you chose bollards, I don't know why bollards would be the right answer, but I tell you why it's definitely not the right answer. And so you can finish that loop. You can finish that cycle of learning. And I think that makes a better question. In fact, I'll tell you, if you got the question right, don't forget to read through the wrong answers, because on your exam, it might be a question about bollards. It might be a question about pressure sensors. It might be a question about video surveillance. So that's another nice part of this is I don't fill it with fake answers or answers that aren't real things. These are answers that come directly from the exam objectives. I think that's the best way to learn. That's the point of these questions. And if you read the question and you have no idea what that question even means, one of the things you can do is at the very bottom of this detailed list, I tell you what section of the exam objectives it came through. In this case, came from Objective 1.2. I have a video called Physical Security where I talk about that. And I have a hot link right there that will take you right to that particular video. And if you have this in a physical form, because I have the exact same practice questions as a physical book, there's QR codes in here. These are QR codes that will not hurt you. These are real QR codes that go to real sites that are trusted. So you can use your phone to watch the video while you're reading the physical book. That's all available in my practice exams. Because this is a PDF, it also has a back button. Did you know your PDF has a back button in it? Mine does. It's right up here at the top. So I can go to the back button, click the back button, and we're now where we started. And we can simply go to the next question that is on our list. Those are my practice exams. Hopefully you found some value there, something that might help you with your studies. If you're looking for something that can help you with practice, this might be a good thing to use. We have specifically written these practice questions to be as close as I can to the same difficulty level, the same tone, the same style, the same voice as actual exam questions. So when you go to the exam, you will be very comfortable with the cadence and the style of the questions on the exam. Even though they are different questions written for that exam, you'll notice that they have a similar method of how they describe these different answers. So that might help you as well. If you think that's something that can help you, have a look for more. You can learn more about it at professormesser.com/securitype. I will also let you know that CompTIA gives you some free study materials that you definitely want to look at if you have not looked at it already. It is the set of exam objectives. This is the official set from CompTIA. This is the PDF of these objectives for the 701 exam. This tells you everything you need to know when you are studying. People will even often ask, I'm ready to take my exam, I think. How do I really know if I'm ready to take my exam? You go to this document. This is a free document you can download from the CompTIA website, and it gives you a bullet by bullet breakdown of everything you need to know. The exam sticks to this document practically 100%. And because of that, you can very easily now understand what you need to know and how much of it you need to know, because they write every single bullet in this list of everything that is expected of you for this exam. These objectives, as I mentioned, are also free. From the CompTIA website, you can simply go to your favorite search engine, type in CompTIA Exam Objectives. We'll take you to the page, or you can use our link. Go to professormesser.com/objectives, and there's a link there that will take you over to the CompTIA website, where you can also download this set of objectives. It is a great checklist to use at the beginning of your studies. It is a great checklist to use before you schedule your exam. Make sure you take advantage of that. And of course, our entire video course follows this set of exam objectives to the letter. Nothing is left out. It is, as we've always said with our training course is a comprehensive set of courses that provide you with every topic from the set of official exam objectives. We do one of these study groups for Security Plus every month. The next Security Plus study group is currently scheduled for November the 20th. These dates and times can sometimes change, so I would highly recommend, if you're ever going to figure out when the next live event is going to be, head over to our calendar. That's where we always keep an updated list. So although I'm telling you November 20th today, next week I might have to change that date. I try not to, but sometimes life happens. So make sure you check in. We definitely are planning to be here on November the 20th, but if we're not there, you'll know exactly when we will be, because I update that calendar immediately as soon as I know that something has changed. Go to professormesser.com/calendar and be able to work through it. Should be a pretty good one if you're someone who's working through and trying to break down what those different options might be. Well, we've done over an hour of Q&A at this point, not just Q&A, but really drilling into the answers for these questions so that we can understand those topics. That might be something that is important to you. If you are looking for more information, we have a daily pop quiz question available. You go to professormesser.com/Twitter/Instagram. And of course, if you've not subscribed to our YouTube channel already, we need to take care of that. Make sure you go over to professormesser.com/YouTube and you join the group of us that is subscribed to our YouTube channel. We're not done yet, though. We have our after show coming up. Make sure you stick around for that. Plenty more to go through. Don't forget about our discounted vouchers on our website at professormesser.com/vouchers and our course notes at professormesser.com. Simply use the menu on the website. You can find all of those things from the main menu. Coming up next is our after show. Stay right here. We're not going anywhere. We'll be back 5 seconds after I put the splash screen up. Our after show is where you can ask me questions in the after show. That's something you might want to do. Instead of me asking you all the questions, we can see what questions you might have. You can answer those questions at that same link we had earlier at professormesser.com/QA. Thank you for joining us in this first hour. Stick around for the after show, and we'll see what questions you have of me. And thanks again for joining. We will see you next time on the Security Plus Study Group. Okay, let me take a sip of a beverage. One moment. And we'll have to see. If you missed today's continuing education credit, you'll have to wait till we're over so you can rewind and go have a look at that and see if it's there. We definitely did mention it. That would be a good one to go through. So now we're in the after show. The after show is where I take your questions. And it's, as I mentioned before, it's the same link. Go to professormesser.com/QA. There's an option there where you can submit a question to me. It's a tab. It's right at the top of your screen. You can go there and submit questions. I will see these questions submitted on my side. In fact, one of the things that you will see, if you look at that right now, is this message that says you can submit questions for the second hour of the study group at any time. We will be moderating questions during the session, so your contribution may not appear immediately. So that's a great place to go. You can simply have a look at what you might want to submit, or you might just want to hang out and see what other people are submitting. We usually have some pretty good questions that come through. So I am going to start sifting through the Q&A that you have submitted. A number of questions have already come in to be able to work with this, that when we are someone you're trying to work through the details, this is a great place to go. We mentioned earlier that in this study group, I offered in that first hour a continuing education unit credit. That's because a number of people may already be certified in their A+, Network Plus, Security Plus, or perhaps other certifications. And one of the things that they want to be able to do is renew that cert. As many of you know, the certification is good for 3 years after you pass the exam. So 3 years goes by, you might want to renew that certification so that you have a different certification. You have a way to renew that for another 3 years, not a different cert, but continue that same cert for another 3-year period. And you can do that in a lot of different ways. You could take Cert Master CE and do it in a day. You can take a higher level certification that might automatically renew your existing certification. Or you can collect what's known as continuing education units, or CEUs. Those continuing education units are available so that you can collect from a lot of different categories of CEU. And once you have a certain number, you're able to submit those CEUs to CompTIA and they will renew your cert. As many of you know, and as Anonymous has said in this message that they have posted, or the question they've submitted, it asks, can I take 5 sessions of this study group to earn 50 credits for a CEU? I passed my Security Plus in June of 2024, relatively recently. So you need to renew it by June of 2027. That's that 3-year period that I just mentioned. So as I mentioned in that first hour, by watching and participating in today's event, you earn 1 hour of a webinar category CEU. So if you watched 5 of these, and you can either watch them live or watch them on demand, CompTIA does not care as long as you get an email from me. That's what they want. If you took 5 sessions of those, you watched 5 of those, either live or on a replay, you would earn 5 webinar category CEUs. So it's 5 CEUs. And as you see here, you need 50 to renew your Security Plus. But you also heard the term webinar category in that list. Why did I mention that? Well, let me tell you why I did. In order to give you the description of why I did, I'm going to head over to the CompTIA website. On the top of their website is a continuing education link. I'm going to click that. And there's lots of ways that you can use to renew your certification. They have a 3-step process here that describes that and what you're doing. The one that I would like to choose here is step 2, choose your renewal path, because you can do things like renew with a single activity. That's not what we're doing today. Renew with multiple activities. That's what we're talking about doing, or other options that might be available. We mentioned some of those. I'm going to click on renew with multiple activities, and you can see there's lots of different things you can do. Earn a CompTIA cert, earn a non-CompTIA cert, training and higher education, industry participation, publishing, and work experience. So if we were to drill down, for instance, into training and higher education, there's a chart on this webpage that describes how many CEUs you can earn. And if you can see there's lots of things you can do. You can complete a training course. You can, for the Security Plus, as we mentioned, you need 50 CEUs. That's what's in that column. You can complete a training course. That gets you 50 CEUs. Attend a live webinar. That's where you are now. 10 CEUs. So in this 3-year renewal period, you can watch 10 of these and earn 10 CEUs, but that's it. That you've hit the limit as to what CompTIA will allow for a webinar category CEU. And so that's why you can do that and watch 10 of these and submit 10 of those in that same process I mentioned earlier, but you got to go get 40 CEUs somewhere else. There's other things you can do. You can get 10 CEUs if you attend a conference. You can get 50 CEUs if you complete a college course. So there's lots of different ways to go through this process. Then they describe how you can submit that CEU and what's important. A lot of different pieces of information in this list. So for example, attending a live webinar like you did today, it explains the timing, the relevance, the documentation you'll need. That's what we provide you in the documentation. And then we've got plenty here. Notice that it also says on-demand webinars and YouTube videos are only valid if you can provide proof of registration or completion certificates. That's what that email is that I send to you. That is the certificate, the certification that you were indeed here. So you have to submit that to me, and then I have to verify it and send it back to you for you to earn that. That's why it's important if this is on demand. If you're wondering what process you should use to earn your certification, I would recommend you go out to really look at the YouTube video description of this video on YouTube. If you look at that YouTube video description, you'll see that I have a video on how to renew your certification in just a few hours. That video doesn't just describe how to accomplish that in just a few hours. I step through each of those major methods of renewing your cert and give you advantages and disadvantages of each of those. You might find that gathering CEUs is not what you would like to use. Instead, after looking at that list, maybe you'll use CertMaster CE. You won't even bother collecting CEUs. Or maybe you're planning to take a higher level CompTIA cert already, and you realize, well, I'll just pass that cert. As soon as I pass it, it's now 3 more years or at least another 3 years, depending on what date you pass that exam. That's when the clock starts counting. So now you've renewed for that time frame. So there's lots of different ways to go through the renewal process. Highly recommend you watch that video or look at the detailed documentation on the CompTIA website. Let's do another question on our list. Lots to go through. Thank you for submitting these. You can submit them at any time using that link that's on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA. So here's another very popular question, by the way. This is from Anonymous, who asks, I'm turning 60 in a couple of weeks. Happy birthday. And I need Security Plus for my job. This is not an unusual thing. The question here asks, am I crazy for doing this at my age, or is age just a number? Well, there's a couple things in this list that tell me that you're probably not crazy. So that might be helpful. I don't know, it might not. But this question says 2 things. One, you're turning 60. And the other one is you need Security Plus for your job. It really doesn't matter how old you are at that point. If the place you work puts Security Plus as a priority, then that kind of answers the question for us. Doesn't matter how old you are. Now, I often tell people the computer doesn't care about your age. The computer has no idea how old you are. I worked with relatively young folks who know a lot. I worked with relatively young folks who do not know a lot. I worked with relatively mature folks, aged people like myself who tend to know many things, but I've also worked with people of increasing age that perhaps are not as good as they could be with these technical topics. So age really does not matter in this particular scenario as far as technology is concerned. I really feel like technology is something that anyone can learn at any point within their lifetime. So I don't think age has any limitation associated with this. The thing that you mentioned here is needing Security Plus for your job. This is not an unusual thing, by the way. If you happen to live in Washington, D.C. area of the United States, or you live in an area where there's a lot of federal government agencies or contractors of federal agencies, you may find that Security Plus is one of their priorities, especially if it's related to the Department of Defense. That's because the DoD has a set of minimum industry certifications that they expect everyone to have if they work in a technology role within that agency, or if you work as a partner to that agency, like a contractor. So that's a particularly important thing to consider. If you're in that particular part of the world, or you work for or want to work for one of those organizations, Security Plus may be the minimum certification that you need to start with. They don't want a CA Plus. They don't care about Network Plus. They want you to have Security Plus. Bottom line, that's their minimum for you to get a job with that organization. So that's not an uncommon thing for those of you looking at this and thinking, why does your job need this? Maybe because they are mandated to needing that. Maybe you work for a contractor and now the Department of Defense has shown up and said, you don't have enough Security Plus certified people here. You need everyone to be Security Plus certified. Okay, we're on it. Or it might be just a third-party company, has nothing to do with the federal government or the Department of Defense. And they may have just decided as a standard for their organization that everybody must have their Security Plus. That's something that has happened to me in certain roles that I have had. So that is a really good example of why Security Plus would be a good place to start. But let's talk first about this, or second, let's talk about the other part of this question. I'm turning 60. Am I crazy? Or is age just a number? This is really not so much an intellectual question, because you're absolutely capable of learning and understanding and excelling with these technology topics at any age. It really does not matter. So that's not the issue. It's not a problem from the computer's perspective or the network. These operating systems have no idea how old you are. So that's not a problem. The only problem you ever run into when you start getting up there in age, like we are, someone turning 60 in a couple of weeks, I feel you. That is one where now you're concerned about what other people think of you. This is probably your biggest stumbling block when it comes to these things. A lot of people will ask me, I work in this particular job now. I want to pivot over to IT. I want to transition over to IT, but I'm 50, I'm 55, I'm 60. Can I do that? Well, of course you can do that. Functionally, intellectually, there's no reason you can't do that. The problem, though, is other people, is that the human nature of things gets somehow embedded into this, and ageism, unfortunately, is a thing, and it's something that has to be considered. Now, fortunately, for those of us that have been around the sun a couple times, we've become very familiar with this. We also have collected a number of business relationships through the years because we've been doing this for a while. So we know people who are in director level positions, vice president, executive vice president, CEO. We know these folks. We've known them for years. We've worked with them. They're at our church. They're at our a group that we work with. They are our kids are on the same soccer teams. These things happen all the time. So when you are at that level where you are more concerned about what other people think of your age than what your age is actually doing for you, then it might be a good idea to reach out to those folks and say, looking for a position in IT, maybe with their organization, maybe with a different organization. What can you tell me? What can you help me with? Can you give me some tips? Do you know of any openings? Is there anyone you would recommend I speak to? Because when that person at that level brings up your name, that helps grease those skids a little bit. It helps things move a little bit faster through and perhaps minimizes the impact of walking into a room of strangers and somehow trying to justify, I'm 60, but I want to do this technology, in a world where a lot of the folks doing that technology tend to be of a younger age. So I would highly recommend taking advantage, it's a bad way to put it, but using those relationships that you have built. It's why often I will tell people, if you don't have a LinkedIn account already, you need to have one. Not to publicly announce how fantastic you are. You can certainly do that on LinkedIn, and many people do, and that's fine. But I use LinkedIn as a networking tool, not a computer networking tool, a people networking tool, a way to keep track of all of the people I've worked with. And I'll give you my apology now for those of you that have sent me LinkedIn requests to join to link together. That's what LinkedIn is about, is creating these networks of people. You may have noticed that you were not approved. I did not click, yes, I'm going to have you join my network on LinkedIn, because I've never worked with you. I keep my LinkedIn circle to only people I have directly worked with. And this allows me first to easily keep track of where they are. There's not a lot of noise in there. But it also allows us to kind of have a more tightly knit and better set of conversations amongst each other. And it makes it easier to introduce people that way because you have a direct connection to them. Now, we have a LinkedIn page for Professor Messer, so you can get our daily pop quiz questions. You can learn what we're doing. I announce whenever we're doing a live stream. It gets posted on LinkedIn. We have a separate page for that. You're certainly welcome to join that. Anybody is welcome to. That is a public page, and you will just automatically become a member in there. But a personal connection on LinkedIn can only get if we work together. So that's a little bit different. So I would highly recommend, if you don't have one of those already, make sure you create one and link in everyone you know. That will be very, very important, not only for this job effort that you're going through now, but it may also be very important in the future when you need to find the next job, or when somebody wants to find you to ask you if you would be interested in applying to a position, which I've also done on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a great place to go. I've had positions at a company I've been working with, and I thought, I know the perfect person for that. Let me send them a LinkedIn message and see if they're interested in that role. Sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. But at least I know how to get in touch with them and be able to communicate to them. So that's a really good example. And sometimes this past week, I got an email out of the blue from somebody I'd not heard of, I don't know, since college. Sometimes that happens. So it's a really good example of where LinkedIn can be very, very valuable. And it's a good way to keep track of where people are and to help in situations like this where you're trying to get that job or get that better job. Let's keep going through your list of different questions you have. You can submit those questions at any time using the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA. You can ask a question about technology. You can ask a question about certifications. You can ask a question about anything if you would like. Doesn't have to be about technology or certifications if you would like. Let's keep going through this list and see what else might be here. I think this is a good one to go through because all of us are in this particular situation, or we will be eventually. And this is from Ruan, who asks, do you have any last minute tips for me? Because I'm writing my Security Plus tomorrow morning. Here it comes. You're starting to feel it now. It's starting to get a little tense because we're in the last 24 hours of this. This question I would have preferred you asking about a week prior to the exam, but the same tips really do apply. Yours are just going to be greatly collapsed into a less than 24 hour period. One of the things that I often tell people many, many, many times in these study groups constantly, and you've heard it already, so many times today, is how important those exam objectives are. If you are in that last week, or you're at that point where you think to yourself, I can't study any more of this. I've gone through everything multiple times. I really think I'm ready for the exam, but how do I know if I'm ready for the exam? Did I miss something? Was there a topic that maybe I skipped over? I'm not sure. But one of the ways you can be sure is to go to the exam objectives. Yes, it's the exam objectives again, but now let's drill down on these so you understand why I'm saying this. Here's a set of exam objectives. They are downloadable from the CompTIA website. You can go to professormesser.com/objectives, and it will have a link to take you over there. It tells you in the exam objectives, let's do this page by page, tells you about the exam, what this exam is about, what you're expected to get out of the certification, tells you about their authorized materials use policy. I've had people send me messages that say, wait, I read this and I'm not sure if Professor Messer fits into this. Well, they have a link right here that you can go through their exam policies. They have on their website, you can type in professormesser.com and it will tell you that's a good place to study from. Or if you type in the URL of a different website that is not authorized, it will tell you it is not a good place to study from. So those options are available on the CompTIA website. We also have a list of objectives here. So if you wanted to know how the exam is structured, general security is 12% of the exam, threats, vulnerabilities, and mitigations is 22% of the exam, and so on. So you know exactly how much. The Security Plus tends to be relatively similar in scope. The only two differences are really security operations is 28% and general security is 12%, but everything else is around the 20% range. So about very similar across all those. But look at the detail in the exam objectives. Let's just start at the beginning. Domain 1.0, general security concepts. Section 1.1 is compare and contrast various types of security controls. This begins with categories, which are technical, managerial, operational, and physical, and it concerns control types that are preventive, deterrent, detective, corrective, compensating, and directive. Not detective, but directive. The names they can throw you a little bit. So you need to be able to explain to yourself or someone else what are those different categories and how do they fit into this mix of things. And then of these different control types, what do those different control types mean? And maybe an example of each one. So if you know those, you can check those off. Got it, got it, got it, got it. In fact, this is a PDF. I'm going to use my PDF annotation. We'll choose green as a color, and I can mark out, yep, I know the categories. I got those down. Control types I've got down. You know, one thing I didn't know when I went through this list is compensating. So let's make a note in our annotation that I need to go back and I need to do compensating. I need a little bit more on that one. So we'll mark that one. But directive and detective, I got both of them. So there's our list. Now we've already gone through that section. Now you know of that section which one of these you need to spend more time on. Now let's go to the next section, and we do it all over again. This is summarized fundamental security concepts, and you can go through each one of these bullets and either mark it as green, mark it as red, or maybe mark it as yellow, depending on how you feel about it. That would be a good way to categorize those so that when you're done, you have gone through the 700 plus exam objectives that are in this list, and you now have either a good idea of how much you know about that particular topic or a good idea of how little you know about that particular topic. It is a great checklist to use. It will point you exactly to the objectives that you feel you might be a little bit weak on and give you an opportunity to study those just before walking into the exam. I think that is one of the best things you can do. That's why I mentioned ideally you would be doing this a week before the exam because there are so many objectives that you need to know for the 701 exam. So that's a really good example of where it might be a really good chance. You've got less than a day. You can go through these in a couple of hours and at least get a feel for different topics that you notice are in the red, and you can really study those right now. Who knows? You might get asked that on the exam. You might get some extra points just because you went through that list and you marked them green, yellow, and red. Another something to consider. That was a great question. Thank you for submitting that. Let's go through some more questions. We talked about technology earlier, and we talked about real-time operating systems, how important they were, and how they operated. Well, DD sends the message in, when and where are real-time operating systems used in the IT industry, like in factories or something? Well, we don't generally see real-time operating systems in IT. There's very little in IT that needs to be deterministic. Most of the things we do in IT are non-deterministic. Ethernet's a really good example of that. The protocols on our network, those are things we really can interrupt, and there's no formal way to force a particular protocol to have a much higher or unlimited priority over another. We can add some prioritization to some of the things we do in IT. Real-time operating systems are often in other systems, other types of systems. You mentioned here factories or something. I think probably the most common real-time operating system that you would run into is the example I gave earlier. It's your car. Your car has inside of it a real-time operating system, a number of real-time operating systems for that matter. For example, I'll give you the example I give here. You are in your car. As you're probably aware, most everything in your car is controlled through computers. Your radio is controlled through a computer. The horn on your car is sometimes controlled through a computer. The brakes on your car are controlled through a computer. And that's because a lot of the braking systems, I think we're probably at the point where it is a mandate, as a requirement from, at least in the US, that all cars, I believe it's now, maybe it's a couple years from now, but all cars must be equipped with anti-lock braking. For those of you not familiar with anti-lock braking, you know that on older cars that don't have anti-lock braking, if you are trying to stop the car and you just jam on the brake pedal, it will lock up those tires. And when you lock up tires, they tend to skid. And when tires skid, you start losing control. And that's one of the drawbacks of anti-lock, is that if you're trying to avoid something in the road, you may be causing yourself to be in an accident just because you locked up the brakes. So on our modern cars, of course, we have anti-lock brakes. When you jam on the brake pedal, it doesn't lock the tires. Instead, the tires have an oscillation to them. It brakes and unbrakes and brakes and unbrakes and brakes and unbrakes. It's constantly braking at a pulse so that we are slowing the car down. We are limiting the amount of skid and therefore stopping the car more efficiently. And perhaps most importantly, we are still under control when we are braking. So it actually is a much more effective way to brake the car in a way that we as humans could not possibly do. The only way we would be able to control the brakes that way is through an automated method using the anti-lock brake computer. Well, could you imagine if while you're braking with this anti-lock braking and trying to avoid an animal that's in the middle of the road, suddenly the check engine light comes on because you're low on oil. Now, what if there was a non-deterministic operating system in the car that while it's going through the process of checking the amount of oil in your system, it's not able to brake? Hold on. I know you have to brake right now, but I really need to check the oil. I'll be right back with you. Let me check the oil. It's kind of low. Let me turn the light on for low oil. Oh, were you trying to brake? That's the problem with non-deterministic operating system. We want to be sure the anti-lock braking system is solely focused on anti-lock braking. It's there to protect us. And so that's probably one of the most common ways to have a real-time operating system is through that anti-lock braking. There's a lot of other real-time operating systems out there that do different things. And certainly industry, military, anything that is very time sensitive is using a real-time operating system. I used to use in IT, I will give you an example of a real-time operating system. Here we go. I used to be a systems engineer with Network General. This is a company that made a product known as the Sniffer, an actual product protocol analyzer. That's where the name came from, was that product that was created. And so my specialty was protocol analysis and understanding how to use this technology to be able to gather that information from your network. One of the challenges, though, is a lot of these networks we used on today's environments, they're very high-speed networks. And we had specialized hardware that was able to capture, at the time it was an ATM network. That was a type of topology. You had Ethernet, you had wide area networks, you had ATM. Did not refer to automatic teller machines. This was a protocol, asynchronous transfer mode that we used on our network for an instant and then it was gone. Ethernet turned out to be better. But in the meantime, we needed some way to capture those. Well, they weren't frames, they were cells. We needed some way to capture ATM cells off of these networks. And we had specialized hardware to do that. But because the network was so fast, given the type of technology that was available to us at the time, the device that plugged into the ATM network that captured the cells was a real-time operating system. I believe it was VxWorks was the name of the operating system. And so it was able to perform these captures of these cells at the full line rate of this ATM network, even though we were doing other things on the computer at the same time, because it was running its own real-time operating system. So there, I was able to come up with an IT example of where an RTOS might be used. So that would be a really good example of where you could do that in something that is IT related. So it does get there. We do use those, and it is something that is important. And that's one of the reasons why real-time operating systems is on the Security Plus exam. Let's do some others here. Some other questions that have come in. We do have some time left, so let's do that. So I think a good example for this, let's keep going. This is a great summary question that I think really very succinctly describes what most of us are thinking when we look through those lists of acronyms, which is from Fritz, who asks, should we know all of them? What a great question. Because if you look at the list, it's a big list. There's a comprehensive set of acronyms. If you haven't seen them, guess where they're located? That's right, the CompTIA exam objectives. As if I haven't talked about it enough. In the back of the objectives, is a list that says, let me move my big head out of the way. There it is. CompTIA Security Plus 701 acronym list. The following is a list of acronyms that appears in the CompTIA Security Plus SY0-701 exam. That's not exactly true, but it's close enough. It's close enough to a list that appears on the exam. Candidates are encouraged to review the complete list and attain a working knowledge of all listed acronyms as part of a comprehensive exam preparation program and breakfast. So one of the things that you'll notice is that there's a big list, and they are all listed out here. Here's 1 page, 2 page, 3 pages, practically 4 pages of acronyms for Security Plus. There's a great deal of them here. Now, the reason I told you that statement about all of these acronyms being on the exam, I don't think it's necessarily true. There's a few that are listed in here that I'm wondering why they're in here. Like, they did not quite match the exam objectives. In fact, they're nowhere listed in the objectives, but they're listed as an acronym. So I think some of these might be there from previous editions. But they're all legitimate acronyms. They're all things that are in the industry and all things that you might run into. One thing I will tell you about this list, though, is do not use this as a simple flashcard effort. For example, do not make a flashcard that just says CIO stands for Chief Information Officer. CIRT stands for Computer Incident Response Team. CMS stands for Content Management System. If all you're doing is memorizing the acronym and the words associated with the acronym, you're doing yourself a disservice, because that's not what they want you to do. In fact, you will never get a question on the exam. I rarely use the word never. You will never get a question on your exam that says, what do the letters CIO stand for? Or any acronym. And then they have a list of things, or they expect you to fill it in. They never ask that trivia type question. It is always a question where they are using the acronym in its normal form to describe something else that's going on. So you have to know what that acronym is. In fact, you might not even know what the words are associated with the acronym. It may be much more important that you understand when you would use that. For example, there is a acronym here, CSU. It stands for Channel Service Unit. Well, what is that? That acronym doesn't even tell you what it is. And so the question might be, a security administrator is replacing a CSU. Which of the following would be the most likely reason for performing this task? And then they might have 4 different situations that you found yourself in. And you have to choose the one that fits this one. Even if you knew that CSU means Channel Service Unit, you can't answer that question, because Channel Service Unit doesn't even mean anything in that context. There's no way to understand what that means. So I always recommend, if you are going to do flashcards, put CSU. On the other flashcard, other side of the flashcard, put Channel Service Unit, but then also put a description of what that is and when you would use it. That is probably the most important part of this. It's more than just memorizing letters and the words. And if all you're doing is memorizing letters and the words, you're wasting your time. I shouldn't say wasting your time, because some of these you can figure out based on the name, but others you cannot. So I would highly recommend you not only, you're going through the process already, put the name in, the initial in, put the name in, and then a description of what that is and where you would use it. That is a much better way to memorize acronyms. Should you know all of them? CompTIA says you should. I think most of those you will learn organically as you go through the study materials. If you are someone who skips over some of the study materials, you might want to go back to that list of acronyms just to make sure you don't miss any of those, because that's not what you want to do either. Will be relatively important. I think my course, and we have an effort for doing this. In my course and my study materials, I focus on always giving you the acronym and the name. You'll notice that in the video training materials. You'll notice that in my course notes, and you'll notice it in the practice exams. Super important. So let me give you an example. So on my practice exams, we were looking at some questions here. Let me find one that has an acronym in the question itself, and we can kind of break this down. So here's a good example. So this is the answer page to a question from my practice exams. The answer was MDM. That was the answer. But in the description of the answer, I always put an MDM, and I always put in parentheses, mobile device manager. Because the last thing you want to do when you're working through a set of questions is try to remember what that acronym stands for. So we spell it out for you. Not just in the right answer, but down here in the wrong answers. One of the wrong answers was COPE, a device that is COPE, corporately owned and personally enabled. So I always write that out. I think that's a super important part of this. You have to see it over and over and over again. And if you're in the process of studying, it's nice if you can get some constant feedback on these so it reminds you, oh, that's right, that's what COPE is for. Especially if that's something that you're trying to figure out on this list of different items. It can be overwhelming sometimes, all these abbreviations, especially, and you saw today, some of these questions are nothing but abbreviations as the answers. So it's important to be able to see what they mean when you're going through the results of that particular question. Let's do a vestibule story. This is from Kevin. Kevin wasn't expecting me to have a vestibule story. Kevin asks, what's the coolest vestibule you've seen? Without breaking NDA, of course. I can talk about this one because it is not, I won't mention the company, but I'll mention the scenario. So one of the answers we had in one of the questions today was an access control vestibule. For those of you familiar with those, access control vestibule, let's get a picture of one. Let's get, Google shows me an access control vestibule. This is not one you would see on a data center, but it's accurate enough. There's a set of doors on the outside. There's a middle part, and there's a set of doors on the inside. Now, in most data centers, this is sort of a locked-in area. When you walk in, it locks the door behind you, and only then can you open the door in front of you. And very often in a data center, you have to be able to badge in. You have to be able to show some credentials for that door to open. Otherwise, you can walk right out the door and go the other direction. You can't get in. There's a lot of different flavors, a lot of different kinds of access control vestibules. Let me see if I can find one. I have a story about access control vestibules, as many of us do. I want to find you the ones that I have used before. This is a very common one that you will find in a data center. You walk in, there's actually a pressure pad here. It knows that a human walked in there. It closes behind you. You're closed in. Or when you walk in, it does not close until you, in this case, it looks like you have to provide a fingerprint or a handprint, and you probably have to provide an access card, and you may even have to type in a PIN. And then the door closes and the other side opens. So only then can you walk through. Obviously, you have to make sure that you don't have very much with you because not much can fit into there. But you can see you can't get in, and only one person at a time can really do that. And it weighs you. If suddenly 500 pounds shows up in here, it won't open the door because it knows two people are standing there in the middle of this. So it's a very good example. And it knows how much you weigh. So when you put in your credentials, like, whoa, you just gained 150 pounds? I don't think so. Pretty smart in the way they operate. Well, I was in a data center, a very large, very modern data center in another country. I was in the EU somewhere. And it was a beautiful data center. Just gorgeous. It was a financial data center. And I was with the folks in that organization. We were putting in a series of network monitoring devices to create some reports that would provide us with response time and utilization measurements of their network. So it was all about gathering analytics and statistics about how their networks were performing. To be able to do this, we needed to go into the data center. And I couldn't touch anything, but I could stand behind them and go, yep, plug that in. Yep, you do this. Yep, now it's on the network. Now we're good. So I was kind of supervising. Whenever I'm in those environments, I don't like to touch anything anyway. It's not my data center. If something goes wrong, we can all say, I didn't touch anything. This is all something else going on besides me. Can you tell I've been there before? Yes, you can. We're in this data center. We walk in, we badge in. They give me a visitor badge, and I go through the vestibule. It closes behind me. It opens up. We go into the room. We do the things we need to do. And then we're on our way back out. You also have to badge out the same way you badged in. So we walked into the vestibule. We hit the access card, and it just sat there. It didn't move. They're like, get out. It's your visitor badge. Get out. Let me try it. So they walk in. They put the badge on with their employee badge. Beep. Nothing happens. We're locked in this smaller room within the data center. We were not in the main data center. We were in a room with, 20 racks. It wasn't a small room, but it wasn't the primary part of the data center. No one was in there but us. And this was on a weekend. I think this was actually at like 4 a.m. It was ridiculous. Why was I there? But I was on US time anyway. Time was a construct of some kind. It was an unusual construct for me that week. So we're in this room, and security, fortunately it was a phone in the room. We called security, said, hey, this door is not working. They come over, they use their badge from the outside. Beep, nothing. The door is not moving. As you can see in the picture that we have here, this one happens to have another set of doors over here that could be opened. In this data center room, there were no other doors. We were in there locked in our data center. Then all of a sudden we heard something behind us. We heard kind of a rustling noise. And what we didn't realize is that the data center wasn't completely constructed out yet. That particular room was not completely constructed out. And in the back part of the room, the back corner, which we couldn't see because it was behind a set of racks, the back corner had some sheeting on the wall, but it didn't actually have a wall behind it. So the security guy had pushed his way through the sheeting into the room and said, we got a hole in the wall over here. You can come out now. So we were able to escape the data center room of death by simply walking through a wall that was never there to begin with. So much for the access control vestibule and our process of badging in and badging out. We could have just walked through the wall to make that happen. But that's how we got out of there, was we walked through the wall. Now, there probably was a process and a way to disconnect the door and have it rotate around. None of us knew what that was, and the security didn't know about what that was either. Now, since then, of course, they have finished their construction. The wall has gone up. The doors are working properly. It was just an interesting story how for a few minutes we were locked in the data center, and we just assumed we were going to die there. We were going to starve to death. And that was it. Our fate was already spelled out in that particular scenario. And it turns out everybody was fine. We made it through. We got out of there. We got some water. We were okay. We made it. So thank you so much for that question. For me, remembering that, it was really a great time. It was in a fantastic part of the EU. It was in the very middle of December. There were Christmas parties going on at the hotel I was staying at every night. It was just a very festive time. So we got to see festivities at night. We got to work during the day. It was so much fun. That's one of the reasons I often tell people this is a great business to be in. It's just another example. They flew me across the world. I got to locked in a data center, and here we are. All because I just happen to know something about technology. Just amazing. More questions. We got a couple more we can fit in before we run out of time here. Let's talk a little bit about the grading process on the exam. This is another one from Anonymous, who's really busy today, who asks, does CompTIA give you partial credit for multiple choice questions and performance-based questions? Well, CompTIA tells us very little about how they grade this exam. In fact, they tell us almost nothing about how they grade this exam. Very few details are available. whenever you're taking the exam, you have no idea if you got a question right or if you got a question wrong once the exam is over. You just don't know. And you don't know how many points each question is worth. We do believe each question is worth a different number of points. We don't know how many points we get for each question. They do not tell you. And they will never tell you. It will be a mystery of life for you because you will never know that. But there is a way that we can get some information about at least performance-based questions. This is from the CompTIA website in a page aptly named Performance-Based Questions, Frequently Asked Questions. And of these frequently asked questions that they have posted on their site, they do have a question at the very bottom. Scroll, scroll, scroll. This question at the very bottom asks, is partial credit given if I answer part of a performance-based question correctly? Finally, CompTIA is giving us some insight, some information, some intel about how they score their exam. Let's read all about it. And they say, there may be questions for which partial credit is offered. I put the B in there. There's no B. There may be questions for which partial credit is offered. However, exam questions and their scoring are confidential, so no further information can be provided regarding which questions may offer partial credit. See, they've cleared it up for us. We weren't sure whether they offer partial credit or not, and they very clearly told us you might get partial credit or you might not get partial credit. I hope that's cleared things up for you. Hope that's made things so much easier. It is a non-answer. Now, the one thing we can take away from it, if anything, is that in the past, we just had no idea if partial credit was even an option. So at least it's an option. At least it could be applied to the exam. At least we might get partial credit. But again, you will never know if you get partial credit. You'll never have any knowledge of that. It's not on your exam details. There's nothing in there that can tell you anything about partial credit. It's not going to help you, but at least there's a possibility. So that was interesting. We got at least a little bit of insight into the exam process and what's going on there, but it is a problem. We still don't know. I still have no definitive answer for you on whether partial credit would be something that we would work through or not, but it's a possibility. We might. Notice that had nothing in there about multiple choice questions. We still don't know if multiple choice questions will give you partial credit or not. And to my knowledge, CompTIA has never told us that either. So that doesn't help either. Let's see if we can fit one more in real quick and being able to make this happen. Got a lot here to work through. Along these lines, we'll take this as a follow-up to the question we asked earlier from Anonymous. This is from Keeley, who asks, so how many questions per section would you say a person would need to study to pass the exam? Oh, I've tried to reverse engineer this all the time. I try to figure this number out. This would be a valuable number to know. And unfortunately, there's no way to calculate it. And even if you did calculate it, it would probably not be very accurate because there's a lot of information we simply do not know. It would be ideal if we could figure out on the exam how many we really need to know about. Let's go back to the exam objectives here. At the very beginning of the exam objectives document is this table that tells us the different domains, 5 different domains. And of course, there's hundreds of bullets in each of these. But it tells you what percentage of the content in that domain will appear on the exam. So of everything in domain 1, that's 12% of the exam. Of everything that's in domain 2, that's 22% of the exam. So you could very broadly, if you simply assumed that every question was worth the same number of points, you could statistically figure out what you think a good number would be to shoot for to earn a passing score. But there's so much you don't know about this. The grading scales between 100 and 900. That's a little unusual. Each one of these sections is probably worth a different number of points. We're just going to assume that every question is worth the same number of points. So we're already not accurate from that perspective. And some of these are not exact lines that we can draw. For example, 12%, if you added up all of the different topics that are in section 1 and 12% and tried to figure out from the exam of an exam worth 100%, and my scale is between 100 and 900, that's 800 points. How much of 12% would that 800 points be? So they don't exactly fit into an exact whole number. That's what I'm saying. And that's why we really do believe the exam itself is worth a different number of points for each one of these. We simply can't calculate it. We can come up with very broad numbers, and I've done that in my exam practice exams book. In the appendix, or not the appendix, the very beginning, the introduction of this, I do have an explanation of what the different scoring areas would be for this particular book. Like if you pass this many questions, this is how good I think you are. And in this list for the practice exams book, for example, I say each question is worth a point. There are 90 questions in each section. So if you get more than 81 questions, that's over 90%, and you'd be in pretty good shape. But of course, the exam is not calculated in percentages. Each question is not worth the same number of points, but that's all we can do. That's all we can really go with. So I just used a very simple, easy to follow method that would get us close. It's not accurate, but it's accurate enough to be able to understand where we sit as far as our studies for the exam. And I think that's what you should do too. If I had to recommend something to you, is don't worry so much about the grading. My big takeaway for you when it comes to figuring out how many questions should I know and how many should I answer to be able to get the passing grade and how do I calculate the final grade? My recommendation to you is don't worry about it. Don't even think about it. Don't even consider it, because ultimately you'll never know. There's no way to reverse engineer it. CompTIA is not going to share this information with you, and you'll never be able to even reverse engineer it once you get your final score. So there's really no point in even trying to figure it out, because whatever we figure out will be wildly incorrect in some way, shape, or form. We simply don't have all of the details. So my recommendation to you is to go through the exam objectives, learn as many of those objectives as you can. And if you do that, it doesn't matter how they score the exam, you're going to pass. So ultimately, the best plan is to always know the topics listed in the official exam objectives. And I think if you do that, it won't matter what scoring method they use. It won't matter how many points are required. It won't matter how many questions would be the bare minimum, because you've already passed all of those. You already know all of the content, and you will do well enough that you will always come out as a passing score on this exam. If take nothing else away today, that's probably the best one, because it's just a waste of your time. You could be spending that time learning about access controls. You could be spending that time learning about access control vestibules. You could be spending that time learning any other topic in the exam objectives. Use your time wisely. Trying to reverse engineering the scoring is not a very good use of your time, because ultimately there's no way to know. And maybe now that we've done that, that's all we needed to know. Now we don't have to worry about reverse engineering. Now we can focus on things that are much more important, that are indeed listed word for word in the list of official CompTIA exam objectives. Well, I think that's given us a pretty good place to finish up. We went a little bit of overtime today, but hopefully you were able to get something from our first hour. Hopefully you learned something new from all of those different acronyms and topics we included. We do one of these study groups every month. Make sure you check out our replay page on our website. You can sign up to a notification email list so you always know when we're going live with one of these. Or if you want to make it easy, just go out to our YouTube channel and subscribe. Click that bell and you'll know immediately when we go live with any of this study group content. It's a great way to also support what we do here. You didn't even have to spend any money. I want to thank you all for being here, not only for that first hour, but thank you for your questions in the after show as well. Always like seeing what questions you might have for me. Wasn't able to get through all of them this time, but there's always next month. We can do that as well. I want to thank you so much for being here today. We have so much fun putting these together and so much fun doing them that it's great that you're able to join us with that, whether you're here live or watching on the replay. Thanks so much for being here, and we will see you next time on the Security Plus Study Group. Thanks, everybody.